many people in the United States have given much thought to the relationship between the U.S. and Latin American countries. This is something that I recently have grown fond of and sparked an interest in. And while reading this book, The Dictator Next Door, I have learned about the good neighbor policy and the transition between the gunboat policy and the good neighbor policy, and also about the regime of Rafael Trujillo and the repressive regime that he led from 1930 till 1961 in the Dominican Republic. As you get into the book, it starts out setting the scene with how the United States went from the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt policy of trying to coerce nations into being allies with the United States until the Hoover and the other FDR policies into showing Latin America that the United States is a good neighbor and that we do care about their domestic and their foreign policies, and we care about the commerce between our two nations and our two regions. And therefore the transition goes from intervening militarily into saying the United States will not militarily intervene into situations that are domestic. And it starts out setting the scene from the colonizations and the struggle of Latin America, and to how the United States has really taken interest in Latin America and really tried to bring them under our wing and tried to get them to be an up-and-coming region as well as with the United States. And then it goes into the power of Trujillo and how his rise to power has come. And it started in the 1920s as he was a commander in the military for the Dominican Republic. And how they had a coup with the military, and the rebels cut Trujillo a deal and said that he would be the president if he helped them with their rebellion against the current president of the Dominican Republic at the time. So after the rebellion, Trujillo became the president, and he also became a dictator. So from 1930 to 1961, he was either the president or he was the dictator of the country. And so his reign of power started. And the author, Eric Paul, he actually goes into great detail about these issues. First off, Trujillo, and also the good neighbor policy, and he's an expert in this. And he also goes into great details about how Trujillo was a tyrant, and how that many of the people loved him, but yet many of the people really just hated how he treated them. And it goes into details about how he started out his first 15 years of reign, that they were rough, but they were oppressive as well, but they weren't as bad as his latter 15 years. And so in 1937, one thing that really brought a crisis for the United States policy of the good neighbor policy for the Dominican Republic specifically was the massacre of the Haitians on the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And Trujillo, within a 5-day period, roughly 5-day period, had about 12,000, it's estimated about 12,000 Haitian or Haitian descended Dominicans killed. They were just all executed, and the local people there on the island know this as the knife. And it was just such a dark time in their history. After the massacre in Haiti and Dominican Republic, Trujillo had many national and international attention from the communities. And the United States, along with other countries such as Japan and China and Germany, had problems with what happened, but the United States eventually found ways to look around this issue, and especially with the rise of World War II coming, the United States focused on other issues. And during World War II, Trujillo found more of an alliance with the United States and found ways for the United States to overlook a lot of what he was doing. And in the good neighbor policy, as well as I said, the United States tried their best to stay out of domestic affairs within Latin America. So this just really played to Trujillo's advantage during this time. And so he used also communism as a form of United States support. So if he were looking for communists in the country, then the United States would back him, even though he was oppressive to the people and oppressive to maybe nations around him. And while Trujillo's military was building during this time between the 40s and the 50s, many people suggested that their military was too large for just national defense, but the United States also backed them and said that it was necessary for rooting out communism, and it was necessary for the militarization and the missions that the United States needed them for. And after all this period, Trujillo's repression became more and more obvious, and he actually grew in certain areas of dictatorship. He was president a couple of times, but during this 30-year period, he was only president for about 16 years, and the other years he was a dictator, unelected. So during this time, his people really suffered many things, but at the same time, he was able to do many economic things that were positive for his country, and he was able to provide for the people nicer things and more jobs and a more stable government and a more stable economy. And so still many people today look at him as a national hero, but also at the same time, others look at him as a repressive dictator that really brought down a lot of bad images for the Dominican Republic. And in May of 1961, this all kind of came to a halt when Trujillo was assassinated outside of Santo Domingo. And actually the CIA has been in question, and long has been, people have tried to investigate whether the CIA was actually involved in all of this or not, because guns, specific types of weapons were used that the CIA usually provided for coups or for other missions for other countries. So many people speculate that the CIA was involved in this, but officially the United States has taken no part, and they have taken no accountability for this. And so Trujillo, his reign was ended, and he was followed by his son as the successor. Many people have examined the good neighbor policy and the pros and cons of the good neighbor policy and whether it was positive or negative. And many people have come to the conclusion that in multiple ways it was a positive for the Latin American countries in the region in general, in the Caribbean and Latin America. And they say that it allowed the countries to be more free and more economically free, and they could have advanced more economically. But also at the same time, it allowed for repression to be either in dictatorships or other forms of government. The dictators could reign more freely in areas as long as they were friendly with the United States and looked out for the best interests of the United States. And this also caused a lot of problems, and this has caused many mixed emotions. And the author does a very good job of being unbiased and really just stating the facts and bringing forth a very strong argument for the good neighbor policy, and also for the specific case study of Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. And this book was very well written. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't that hard to read. It was only about 230 pages. The vocabulary was nice. It really broke down things so that you could understand the good neighbor policy better, and so you could understand what was going on in the Dominican Republic between 1920 and 1960. It really showed me a lot that I didn't know, and I have learned much in class. Also, it showed me many things that I didn't realize with the new good neighbor policy, and that how the United States would allow oppression to go on if it benefited their best interest. And I really hadn't realized necessarily the relations between the United States and Latin American countries and how that worked. It's a very complex and delicate situation and relationship, and it's one that takes time to understand, but this book really reveals much about it and gives a very good understanding of what has happened in Latin America. Dr. Eric Paul Royda has done a fantastic job with this book. He is a specialist in United States relations with the Caribbean, and he has really expounded upon the good neighbor policy and the situation with Trujillo and his regime from 1930 to 1961. And I approve this book, The Dictator Next Door, The Good Neighbor Policy.